Good morning, church. Is everybody ready? Is happy to be back this week? Yeah, let's go ahead and stand on our feet this morning. He's coming on the clouds. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break as broken hearts declare His praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. We open the gates for our King this morning. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. The God who comes. Stop the Lord Almighty, and who can stop the Lord Almighty? Come on. And who, Lord Almighty, no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? And who can stop the Lord Almighty? No one. And who can stop the Lord Almighty? And who can stop the Lord? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. Come on, let's give Him praise this morning. gonna let me down. Come on. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, I know you're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, I know you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God that never fails, working all things out. Working all things out. Come on. Oh, yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Oh, yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy in all my days. Oh, yes, I will. And I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now. It's in the waiting. The same God is never late. He's working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh, yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy in all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Come on, I choose to praise, to glorify the name of our name. Then nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, glorify the name of our name. Then nothing can stand against. And I choose to praise, to glorify the name of our names. Then nothing can stand against. And I choose to praise, to glorify the name of our names. Then nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy in all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Come on.
Good morning. It is good to be back in the house of the Lord. We took a couple weeks off, shut everything down. I was excited about the end of the year. Finally get done with 2020. I started a countdown when 2020 is going to be over. And I remember saying, just because 2020 is going to be over, don't mean it's going to just turn around and get better quick. And 2 days before, the day before New Year's Eve, 2 days before the New Year starts, I found out my in-laws both tested positive for COVID. So Lori called me. She's coming back in town. She says, this was a Wednesday morning. She said, you probably better go get tested. And so I went and got tested. And sure enough, I tested positive for COVID. Lori got home. She tested positive. And then I made it this whole time without ever having any problems. And then my whole family gets it. And I never had any symptoms. I did fine with it. I continue to pray for Dale. He's still fighting it, but he's improving. He's getting better, and the power of prayer is working. But we survived. We had to shut down for a few weeks. We're back at it. And I believe it was the 3rd, we started 21 days of prayer. We do this every year at the beginning of the year, and that's where we spend 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I challenge you to set aside 15 minutes a day and pray for just 5 minutes, and read the Bible for 5 minutes, and then just sit and meditate and listen to God for 5 minutes. And I've noticed something about prayer and fasting, and I've been doing a lot of reading, and the same thing keeps coming up. It is a battle. When when you say I'm going to pray and I'm going to fast certain things, the battle begins because you're getting serious with God. You're getting serious about something in your life. You want to get disconnected from the world. You want to get plugged in with God, and so the battle begins. Just in fasting, if you fast from sweets, I promise you there'll be people at your work that will bring donuts to work that have never brought donuts to work in their life. I give Lori a hard time. I said, when I do the Daniel fast, it's the only time she ever cooks a good meal because I can't have any of it. And it's not. She cooks all the time, but it's just a battle at that particular time. It's a battle. And the thing about battles, I love battles. Some of my favorite stories in the Bible are about battles. I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of studying on different battles. And some of my favorite ones, Moses with the Amalekites. This is when he stood on the hill and he watched the battle of Israel and the Amalekites. And as long as he had his hands raised, then they would win the battle. But when he got tired and his arms would drop, then they would begin to lose. So finally, they just got some stones and they just propped his arms up. And because his arms were up, they won the battle. We have personal battles in life. Naaman was an officer in the army, a high-ranking officer in the army, and then he talked to a man of God, and the man of God, he was expecting to get healed of leprosy, and it was a death sentence. And he goes to the man of God, and the man of God doesn't even show up at his door. He sends his servant, and Naaman's like, if he don't even have the time to talk to me, I'm leaving. And the guy said, hey, just hear him out. The servant said, hear him out. And so the prophet told his servant, he said, tell him to go dip in the Jordan, old nasty Jordan River 7 times, and you'll be healed. And he said, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. And the servant said, if somebody had asked you to do something great, you would have done it without any question. So he goes down and he dips 7 times and comes out and he's made whole. Daniel, and I just did the Daniel fast the first 10 days of this fast this year. And Daniel was praying. He said on the 21st day, the angel showed up and he tells me, he says, I've heard you from day one, but I've been fighting with the princes of the power of the air, and they've been holding me back. He said, I've heard you the whole time. But it took 21 days of a battle to get through. A couple weeks ago, I went live from the house and I talked about the battle that the disciples had when Jesus called them faithless and perverse. You're too connected to the world, you're perverse, and you're not connected enough to God. And that's where prayer and fasting comes in. And last week I talked about one of my favorite battles in the Bible was Elisha. He's surrounded by an army, and it's just him and the servants. And the servants said, what are we going to do? He said, greater is he that is with us. There's more of us than there are him. Of course, the servant just looked at him himself, the old prophet. This guy's. The prophet prays open his eyes and he looks, and the mountains are filled with chariots of fire. So I keep going back to a battle. Today is the final Sunday before we finish up the 21 days of prayer. We're going to finish up Saturday morning. We have a prayer service here Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. It's an amazing service. I pray that every one of you come. That's when we're going to finish up 21 days. So today is the last Sunday. I'm going to be preaching on 21 days of prayer. So today's sermon is also about a battle. And the title of my sermon is this: Today's the day. Today's the day. So this battle takes place on Mount Carmel. So this morning what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through this battle. Verse 20 to, I believe it's 29. We're just going to walk through this battle and look and see what transpires. So starting in verse 20. 1 Kings 18 and 20. It says, so Ahab summoned all of the Israelites and gathered the prophets at Mount Carmel. So this is where the battle's going down. And to give you a little bit of background about King Ahab, the Bible in 1 Kings chapter 16 says, Ahab became king over Israel in the 38th year of Judah's king Asa. But Ahab did what was evil in the Lord's sight more than all who were born before him. He married Jezebel, the daughter of a heathen king, and then proceeded to serve Baal, a false prophet, a false god, and bow and worship him. built in Samaria. Ahab did more to anger God than all the kings of Israel. So that's Ahab. Ahab is an evil king. He took the Israelites and he married a heathen king's daughter, and he set up false gods in the temple. He did more to anger God than any other king that come before him. So verse 21 says, Then Elijah approached all the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. The people didn't answer him a word. Now a little background on Elijah. This is a prophet of God. Elijah was a prophet of God. He held back the rain for 3 years, 3.5 years. He prayed and it didn't rain for 3.5 years. And he prayed again and the rains fell. This is the same prophet that showed up at a widow woman in her son's house, and he said, Make me a biscuit. Now, it says cake. I don't know what Israelite cake is. I do know what a biscuit is. So, and we are in the South. I'm going to go with that. He said, Make me a biscuit. She said, Well, I'll tell you what I was going to do, prophet. I was going to take all that I had left, the grain and the oil. I was going to make me and my son one more biscuit. We were going to eat it, and then we were going to die. It's a famine in the land. And he said, Go ahead and do what I asked you to do. Make me a biscuit. So she takes the last remaining grain. She takes the last remaining oil. She makes a biscuit for the prophet. She gives it to him. This prophet says, You will not run out of grain again until famine is over. And so they go, and she'd get the next morning, she got up, she scooped up enough to make a biscuit. She made the biscuit. The next morning she got up and she scooped enough. And she did that until the famine was over. This was the prophet that did that. He once laid on a boy that was dead, laid over top of him, and brought him back to life. That's the prophet that did that. He one time got to the Jordan River and took off his jacket and rolled it up, hit the waters, and they parted. Some of you think Moses is the only one that ever parted any kind of water. This prophet parted the Jordan River and said he walked across on dry ground. He was so close to God, he didn't even die. He didn't taste death. The Bible says he was walking along and a chariot of fire from heaven came and scooped him up and took him on into heaven. In fact, the Mount Transfiguration, when Jesus was here in his ministry, when he was transfigured, he appeared with Moses and this prophet, Elijah. So that's the Elijah that he's talking about. And Elijah gathers up all the people and he says, How long will you choose between two gods? If God is God, then follow it. How easy. You don't know how often I want to just scream that to people sometimes. You tell me how good God is and what God's done to you, and then I see no evidence at all in your life that God even exists. If God is God, follow him. It didn't say if God is God, say it. That doesn't do you a bit of good. If God is God, follow him. And he said, if the God you made is God, then follow him. But you'll choose today. And the problem was, they had this idea, how much can I live like the world and still get to heaven? I've had people ask me that question. Now, I've seen people live that question all my life. I actually had people ask me that question. How close can I live to the world and still get to heaven? What can I get away with and still make it? Now, worship on Sunday morning and live like the world every other day of the week. That was the problem that these people had. They didn't want to choose. And not much has changed in 2,800 years. The world is still like that. How much can I get by? I want a little bit of what the Word says about God, but then I want a little bit of my own thing, my own God, my own creation. And he said, no more riding to could be money, it could be your job, it could be a new car, it could be fame, relationship you have, social status, it could be lust, notoriety, anything you put above God. Anything you create to take place of God. Jesus in Matthew said, no one can serve two masters. He will hate one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to one. The people, I am the only remaining prophet of the Lord, but Baal 400 and there's one of me, there's 450 prophets of, and he's thinking, I like those odds. So verse 23, he says, look here, what we're going to do, we're going to have a showdown. He says, let 2 bulls be given to us. They, the prophet of Baal, are to choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. I will prepare the other bull, place it on the wood, but not light the fire. So they both had the same exact sacrifice. Verse 24 says, then you call on the name of your God, and I'll call on the name of the Lord, and the God who answers with fire, he is God. And all the people answered, that's fine. We'll do that. The God who answers with fire, he is God. And I don't want you to forget one thing. God still with fire. So verse 25 and 26 says, then Elijah said to the prophet, yourself 1 bull, 6 says they took the bull that he had given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, Baal, answer us. But there was no sound, no one answered. And then they danced around the altar that they had made. From morning until noon, all morning they prayed, Baal, answer us. I asked you to give me 15 minutes a day for these 21 days. And I'm hoping after 21 days, it's just a habit you do. But 15 minutes. If you sit down for 15 minutes, you pray for 5, you read for 5, and you just sit there and listen to God for 5, it goes by really fast. Some people won't even commit 15 minutes a day to God. They prayed all morning long. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been through some 4-hour prayer meetings. Grew up in a church, and they get together like twice a year, and we're going to pray all evening. And we'd get there like 5 o'clock, and they'd pray till 10 or 11. And I was done praying 5 minutes into that service. The longest nights of my life. They prayed all morning long. And they said, Baal, answer us. Baal, answer us. It was 450 of them. But look what the Bible says. But there was no sound, and no one answered. Verse 27 says, at noon Elijah mocked them. He said, shout loudly, for he's a god. Maybe he thinks it's over. Maybe he's wandered away. Maybe he's on the road. Perhaps he's sleeping, and you can wake him up. This is one of the reasons I loved Elijah. He was sarcastic. That's sarcastic. There's 450 of them. There's one of Elijah. He's got no backup. He's got no crew with him. And after all morning of them praying, he steps up. He says, just talk a little bit louder. Maybe he's asleep. I love that. I do. And that's bold. That takes some boldness. I heard a story one time of a man, And his wife had a cat. She loved that cat. He couldn't stand that cat. That cat hated him. That cat was just, like most cats are, it was just evil. And he one morning, he was leaving. There was just a feud between him and that cat. And he said, I think she loves that cat more than she does me. And he was leaving for work one morning, and he ran over the cat. And he said, there's no way she's going to believe that this was an accident. So he gets the cat, and he puts it in the truck, and on the way to work, he stops in this field, and he buries that cat. He goes home, and he never tells his wife what happened. And a day or two goes by. She said, I'm worried about, I'm worried about Skittles. She's not been home. I'm worried about her. And he's like, well, I tell you what, I'll do anything I can to find that cat for you, baby. And so he makes posters, and he puts them all over town, and it says, reward for missing cat, $5,000. He posts them all over town, and his good friend tells him, he says, I see what you're doing. I understand she loves that cat, but how in the world can you afford $5,000 reward for that cat? He said, I work with you. I know what you make. How can you afford $5,000 for that cat? He said, that's bold. He told his friend, he said, if you knew what I know, you can be bold. When you knew what Elijah knew, you can be bold. Elijah knew beyond a shadow of a doubt Baal was not answering that call. And so all morning they did that. They went around, Baal, answer us, Baal, answer us. And he gets out, he can't walk away from a chance to taunt them. Shout louder. Maybe he thinks it's over. Maybe he's wandered away. Maybe he's on vacation. Verse 28 is their response to that. So they shouted loudly. They cut themselves with knives and spears according to their custom until the blood gushed all over them. After all afternoon, they kept on raving until the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no sound. No one answered. No one paid attention. Too many people today have the philosophy of, as long as you believe in something, anything, that's all that matters. If you believe in it, and you truly believe in it, and it's not hurting anybody, if that's what you believe in, then that's fine. That's enough you don't have to believe in one certain thing. Some people say, I can't believe you have the audacity to say Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven. Well, when you know what I know, you can be bold about that statement. Because the Bible says He is the only way. I am the way, the truth, and life. He is the door. And it doesn't matter if you truly believe it. If you believe it and it is wrong, then you are wrong. They were dedicated. They were more dedicated than anybody I've ever seen about their belief. They prayed all morning long. They danced. They shouted. And after they were taunted, they cried louder. They cut themselves with knives and spears until blood gushed all over them. And they did that all afternoon. And for their entire day of dedication, what do they have to show for it? Blood, sweat, tears, scars, and a wet offering. And it said there are no sounds. No one answered. No one paid attention. And at the end of the day, at the end of this year, at the end of your life, if you are serving a God that you have created, all you will ever have to show for it is blood, sweat, tears, scars, and a wet offering. And at the end of it all, there will be no sound, there will be no answer, and no one will be paying attention. Some of the saddest words in the Bible. So verse 30 says, Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. So all the people approached him. Then he repaired the Lord's altar that had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel will be your name. So the 12 tribes of Israel was represented by those 12 stones. Now notice, he stood before the crowd, the 450. When he talked to them, he was cocky. He was bold. He was brash. He was sarcastic. But when it came time to approach God, he came humbly. He built up the altar that had been torn down, exactly the way God told him to do it. He approached God how God had commanded. In other words, Elijah came God's way. The only way you can come to God is God's way. Verse 32 through 35 says, and he built an altar with the stones in the name of the Lord. Then he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 4 gallons. Next, he arranged the wood. He cut up a bull. He placed it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 pots of water and pour it on the offering to be burned and the wood. Then he said a second time, and they did it a second time. And then he said a third time, and they did it a third time. So the water ran all over the altar and even filled up the trench with water. So he prepares the altar. And I can see it. I can see him doing it. Because he's